Memento Mori. Memento Mori is the Latin phrase that, when translated literally, means remember that you must die. The story begins in ancient Rome when the commanders and the generals would win a few battles and they'd be paraded through the streets. But a few slaves would stand behind them, whispering, Memento Mori, remember that you must die. And so this was done to remind them of their mortality and to prevent them from falling into excessive pride or confidence. And so today's video is a reminder that we must die. And this isn't an unusual practice. The Buddhists would do it all the time. They would meditate on death. They would hang skeletons in their monasteries to remind the practitioners to maintain an awareness of death. The Stoics talked about it. Samurai Zen was talked about it. Bushido, the way of the samurai, was also known to be as the way of the dead, or those who lived as though they have died already. And Seneca, he had a beautiful saying about this. He said, let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. And though this is a reminder that we all need, it's not necessarily because we have conquered land or we've triumphed over other people and we've fallen into pride or self-confidence. No. Right? We've already explored that dimension in our past lives, right? But now we've gone too far in the other direction, where we've clinged to being so hard. We're so afraid of life, we're afraid of suffering, we're afraid of death. We don't feel immortal, we feel weak and super mortal, if anything, right? And so we're simply petrified, like a deer frozen at the sight of a predator. And so we worry about suffering, and we do our very best to escape from suffering. And this is where the ideas of enlightenment can be very attractive, especially in the hands of certain gurus. And it's not that there's no benefit to some of the ideas, it's just that there's this obsession with authority, And it's not just the obsession with authority, it's that there's that promise, come through and you will escape all your suffering, achieve nirvana. Whatever the title may be, is just a promise of eternal salvation awaits you. But it's just a clickbait, right? And everyone knows that on a level too, because it won't take long for life to push you around and show you what suffering is all about again. Even if you were Zen, even if you were, Buddhist, Christian, whatever, right? So I say, don't worry about suffering. You've already signed up for it at birth. It's inevitable that you will fail, that you'll feel disheartened, that you'll experience illness or loss. There's a ton of life tragedies, I don't need to list all of them. And so there's no escape. And that might, bring up some resistance within us, but eventually the water settles. And so it begs the question, if there's no escape, what comes next? And so what remains is really the freedom to suffer, the freedom to experience all of life in its entirety. Not just what you accept, and right? All of it, even what you're afraid of. I call it an escape from compounded suffering, but it's not exactly like that. There was once a awakened master. He was traveling across the land looking for another master, and he knows this guy has taken a vow of silence, and so he was curious. So he traveled a little bit and he came across this guy, stood by the river carrying a bunch of stuff. So he looked at him and he got that vibe, he was vibing with him. He was like, okay, I feel like this might be him. So he wanted to test him. So he asked him, what is the spiritual process all about? So the silent master is carrying a bunch of stuff. He just dropped them on the ground. And so he asked, what is awakening? And so he picked everything back up. And the other master nodded in approval. The point being is simple. We live a life afraid of loss, afraid of suffering, afraid of poverty, afraid of losing those we love. And so what the spiritual expeditioner or the monk or the sadhaka, or whatever you want to call him, does is he loses everything intentionally. He drops all of it. He leaves his family behind, he leaves his country, he drops his ideology, he even drops his speech. And then he realizes firsthand that even when he dropped everything, he came out fine. And And even crazily, he even experienced moments of happiness. But even more importantly, he experienced moments of suffering. So even when he cultivated that atmosphere of detachment, he still suffered. If you cultivate an atmosphere of attachment, you still suffer. And so that's inevitable, just like your death. And so you don't live to conquer suffering or to avoid death. You live and appreciate the beauty of life despite it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.